In this video, I'd like to demonstrate how to create a histogram in Excel. We know from the text that a histogram is a graph that shows the frequency of values of a variable within certain ranges. First thing that we need to do is define those ranges. And we see here I've got a variable that ranges between about 0 and 10. So we might define our ranges as being from, say, 0 to 1.99, from 2 up to 3.99, from 4 up to 5.99, from 6 up to 7.99, and from 8 up to, technically it should be 9.99, although we might just call it 10. To plot this histogram, we need the frequency or the counts that are in each range. We could just do this by hand. One approach would be count all the values that are, I guess they'd be either zeros or ones, because twos would be in the next category. So right here we've got one of them. I might mark that off to note that I've counted it already. And 2. So then up here, in our data set or our variable, we have 2 values that are between the range of 0 to 1.99. The next range or bin would be 2 to 3.99, so because we've got whole numbers, these would be 2s and 3s. And we see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of them. So up there we'll put a 5. It might be faster if we sorted the data first so all these values were in order. To do that, highlight the data, and I include these X's here too because when I reorganized and sort things in column A, I want the things in column B to go with it. And then up at the top in the data menu, there is an option called sort. If you want to do it quickly from smallest to largest, and that includes both numbers and text, you can just click this button. And if you want to customize it a little bit more, click this button, and it'll bring up this window here. So I would like to sort by the values in column A, which is currently called XXX. You see this thing over here is clicked. That means the first row in those cells is the name of the variable. And I would like to sort values, smallest to largest, looks like a good idea to me. And now it'll be a little bit easier to count all the values in certain ranges. So for the next bin here, I need all the 4s and 5s, and I can just quickly see right here that I've got 4 of them. The next bin I want all the 6s and 7s, and I've got 3. And then the last one I want the 8s and 9s, and I've got 1. Now there's other ways to do this using those built-in Excel commands. On our exams, Excel use is not going to be included because it's just a little bit too delicate to make sure that students are staying off the internet during exam periods. But for use on quizzes or the projects, it might be helpful to use these shortcuts. Although none of those assignments are timed. So if you choose not to learn these shortcuts, that's up to you. If you find that it's just too difficult to learn, know that you could just do things manually as long as your data set isn't overly large. There are other built-in commands in Excel that will help you count values. So imagine you've got a data set with maybe 1,000 different values and you don't want to count them all individually. You could use this count command, and then you highlight all the cells that you want it to count. And there are 11 of those. A nice feature of the count command is if you have any values that are blank, such as these, that function count only counts information that has numbers in the cell. That includes text like XXX. In that block of cells that I've highlighted there are only 8 values. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the value XXX is not counted, and all of these empty cells are not counted. Go back and fix those. Now there's another formula in Excel called COUNTIF. It's a little bit harder to use. We see here that the things that Excel wants us to type in is the range of cells that you want it to look at, and I would probably highlight all of them. So count everything between A2 to A16, but only count them if a certain condition is met, such as count all of the values that are less than 2, or count all the values that are less than 4, count all the values that are less than 6, all the values less than 8, and all the values that are less than 10. Oops. I think that needs to be in quotes. There we go. Oops, I typed in grayer. My mistake. There we go. Okay. So within that entire block of cells, there are only 2 values that are less than 2, and those are the 2 values 1 and 1. Next command, COUNTIF all of these values, but only count them if they are, in quotes, less than 4. And it's a little bit more complicated to say COUNTIF it's between 2 particular values. So my suggestion would be to do them this way. Count all the values that are less than 2, less than 4. There are 7 of those. It would be these 7 right here. Count all these if they are less than 6. And you could continue on and do the others. And then if I wanted to create these values, which are the ones that you plot on a histogram, this would be I think it's called a cumulative distribution function, if you wanted to graph those. I could then use another formula, another calculation in Excel, and say, calculate the difference between this cell right here, which has a value of 2, and the cell above it. Now the cell above it right there is empty, so it's going to treat it as a 0. And you'll get a value of 2. If I copy that formula down, that reference, instead of being to cell F2 minus cell F1, if I paste that down here, it's going to be F3 minus F2. And then one more time will be F4 minus F3. And we'll see these are exactly the values that I want. This cell here that's calculating a value of 11 is calculating all of the values that are less than 6. This cell was calculating all of the values that are less than 4. So the difference between that, 11 minus 7, is all of the values that are less than 6 but not less than 4. That is, they're between 4 and 6. And that's exactly what we wanted to calculate that frequency within the range 4 to 5.99. Oops. Well, what happened? Nope, I did greater than 8. There we go. Type carefully. Last one. There we go. And I paste this formula down. Again, it might be a little bit tedious to calculate those commands in by hand, but you can imagine that if you had, say, 100 or 1,000 different values in this column here, just continuing on for a long way, it's much faster to do this command 5 times than to count it all by hand. In today's world of data analytics or big data, very large data sets are very, very common. Sometimes you can get data sets with as many as 10,000 or even 1,000,000 different data points. Knowing some of these shortcuts to kind of tabulate your data and calculate these frequencies can save you a lot of time. That makes you very valuable as a professional. Now, once you've got those frequencies created, essentially all we need is to create a bar graph where this is the name of the bars and this represents the heights. To create those graphs, we go up to the Insert tab at the top, and this little menu over here has all sorts of different charts. There's one up here for bar graphs, or column graphs, I guess. I guess bar charts are horizontal, so we want what Excel calls a column graph or a column chart. And you've got a couple of options here for if you want two-dimensional ones with stacked values. You can have different stuff side by side. Maybe I wanted a frequency of all the X's and a frequency of all the Y's, so you have different colored columns there. We just want a simple one right here. And while it's hidden in my window over here, I'll have to stretch this out a little bit. There's an option up at the top there. When I've got my chart highlighted, there's a button here called Select Data. Now you can try to highlight the stuff that you want graphed in chart data range, and you would just highlight this block of 10 cells, or maybe 12 of them if you want to highlight the names up at the top. Excel will try to automatically create the graph that you want. Sometimes that doesn't always work. Excel tries its best and gets it wrong anyway. So we'll highlight the cells that we want graphed on the y-axis. The name is going to be called frequency, because this is a histogram, and histograms always show frequency. And then the values that I want graphed, you can either type them in by hand, or you can click on this button here, and then it'll go back to the main spreadsheet and you can highlight the values. I'll be a little bit careful here that +1 is not correct. There we go. And then the values that you want for the horizontal axis, that's the x-axis down here, are not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just automatically named them the first category, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And the names of those categories that we want should be the names of the bins. So I'll click on that button, tell Excel that the names should be in these cells. And there we go. Now we've got our histogram. It's not exactly formatted the way that it would be in the book, but all of the same information is there. It tells us that within this, this variable that we're plotting, there are values between 0 and 1.99 2 times, 2 to 3.99 5 times, 4 of these, 3 of these, and 1 of these. And that's exactly the information that a histogram is supposed to be presenting. Now there's other types of graphs that you can create. I'm going to leave you to explore those on your own. If you click off of the chart here, then all the menus at the top will go back to the normal ones. Click on Insert, see all these graphs. You can create scatter plots, you can create spider web plots, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the book. You can create pie graphs. Each of them have their own little quirks as to how to format the graphs, but if you understand the basic ideas of highlighting cells and choosing cell references for Excel to plot, then the only real struggle is making sure that you've got the numbers already prepared so that Excel knows what to graph.